The story of the underdog musician trying to find their place in the world while attempting to keep their friendships intact is one done many a times in Hollywood. The two critically panned films I'm going to compare today also fall into this category, except one is about a bear adapted from a theme park attraction, and the other is about a teenage rocker and based on a Hasbro cartoon. They are The Country Bears and Jem and the Holograms. These two seem like unusual films to compare, but it's not that odd. First, let's take a look at the history. The Country Bears was, of course, based on the Disneyland attraction, the Country Bear Jamboree, and was the first of Michael Eisner's short-lived attempts to turn the park's recognizable rides and attractions into movies, with Pirates of the Caribbean becoming the only successful film in this strategy. My main question is, why the Country Bear Jamboree? When I went to Disney World oh so many years ago, I went on it, but it was never really something that stuck with me, nor that I want to go on it a million times, like, say, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and Star Tours. And apparently I'm not the only one, since the Jamboree even closed its Disneyland doors before the movie was even released, and nobody really cared that much. For the film, they hired Animaniacs writer Peter Hastings to direct, so there was certainly promise for this to be a funny little musical road trip, despite the odd choice of source material. It was not. As for Jem and the Holograms, that was based on the 1980s animated series by Hasbro, and to bring it to the screen, they hired the economic horror film producer Jason Blum and Justin Bieber documentary and G.I. Joe Retaliation director John Chu, who decided to make it for a $5 million budget. When the trailer was first released, Jem fans were not pleased, as they felt it completely misunderstood the original series and its appeal. To be perfectly honest, I had no idea Jem had such a hardcore fanbase. I always assumed it was one of those 1980s cartoons in the vein of He-Man and Captain N that was mocked for its kitschy animation and obvious commercialism. But apparently there is a dedicated fan base of Jem and the Holograms fans, who praise Christy Marks' original series for its depiction of strong female characters, its music, and unapologetic 80s style. You learn something new every day. I actually did see the movie in theaters and went to watch it without having seen the original cartoon because I wanted to look at the film on its own rather than compare it to its source material. And how did I feel about it? Well, let's start comparing these two films. Both of these films have plots that focus on a cliched storyline we often see. The Country Bears goes for the let's reunite the band, put on a show, and save this old building plot, which we've seen in movies like The Blues Brothers and The Muppets. Jem and the Holograms, meanwhile, is about the overnight sensation who ends up in the hands of the evil record company, and the protagonist has to choose between fame and fortune or her friends. Nothing really original, but just because a plot has been done before does not mean you cannot do something interesting with it. Neither of these films do that. Let's start with The Country Bears, which involves a bear cub who thinks he's human until his adopted brother tells him his actual species. Which is really stupid. When he decides to locate the Country Bears, we're forced to sit through ridiculous and unfunny hijinks as he meets each band member. Are any of them fleshed out? Not really, and it does not help that the animatronics leave quite a bit to be desired. The script also takes all the fairly predictable turns, with the bickering band members, the close call, Barry giving up, and then finally everyone reuniting for the big concert that saves the day. Again, this would not be too much of a problem if I felt any personal investment, but instead we're mostly treated to jokes about how these are bears that are somehow accepted as just a part of society and not much real character development. There are a lot of cameos in The Country Bears, but they're completely wasted and not particularly funny, like this one with Elton John where they confuse him for a gardener. Get it? Because he's a world-famous singer and they don't recognize him, even though it's obviously Elton John. Yeah, that's the kind of material in this movie. With Jem and the Holograms, I actually thought the movie began rather decently as we focus on the home life of our main characters, and one could see the chemistry between the sisters, and I bought them as such. However, as the plot went on, it just became more and more generic, and the film throws in a couple of odd subplots. Interwoven with the standard rise to stardom story is a subplot involving a mystery surrounding the missing pieces of a robot built by Jem's father. It doesn't mesh particularly well with the main story, and feels like a whole other movie found its way into this one. There's also an entire sequence where Jem breaks into the record company building to steal something that belongs to her anyway, and feels really pointless when one stops to think about it. Like the Country Bears, Jem is rife with tired cliches, though a part of me wonders if maybe the filmmakers were a little self-aware about them. We get the expected sequence of events where Jem signs a solo contract, leading to the misunderstanding with his sisters getting angry at her. Then, after one scene, they're happy and friends again. Again, that entire event was completely and utterly unnecessary and added little to the overall plot. One device in Jem and the Holograms is using YouTube clips of musical performances to enhance the scenes, and using Google Earth for the location transitions. At first, this is kind of a clever way to comment on how social media can quickly turn anybody into a well-known musical talent. But then they start using this more and more, and it quickly becomes annoying, and after a while just distracts from the scenes. Musical number-wise, they're just sort of generic, and the songs are not memorable enough to stick in one's mind. I certainly did not leave the screening humming these songs to myself. The songs in the Country Bears are similarly uninspired, and were also treated to completely superfluous musical sequences. The songs the Bears sing on stage make sense, but then you have one in a diner that serves very little purpose to the plot, and just stops the film dead in its tracks. The whole point of a musical is to move the story forward with songs, and a couple of these scenes in the Country Bears don't do that. They're also littered with these singers who I guess Disney wanted to turn into the next big thing. I've already talked briefly about the lead actors in Jem and the Holograms, and they are quite good. They were natural, and even though I didn't quite buy their super quick rise to stardom, I thought that bond was well portrayed by the actresses. Hayley Kiyoko is a particular standout as the kleptomaniac of the group, a running joke that could have fallen flat, but Kiyoko somehow makes it work. Ryan Guzman as Rio is just a piece of wood here, and mainly exists to be Jem's love interest. As for the Country Bears, the voice actors behind them certainly do an adequate job, especially when you have great voice artists like Dietrich Bader, Stephen Root, Brad Garrett, and Kevin Michael Richardson providing the vocals. The humans are not quite as good. Eli Marienthal is annoying and unlikable as Barry's brother, Barry's parents just mug for the camera, and Dietrich Bader and Daryl Mitchell are given thankless roles as a stupid and unfunny pair of policemen trying to track down Barry. However, the actors playing the villains in both of these films know exactly the right note to play. Juliette Lewis in Jem and the Holograms knows she's playing a one-dimensional and over-the-top villain, and she relishes the part. Every time she is on screen, the movie gets a little more entertaining. She digs her teeth into the role, and she's clearly having fun. Ditto Christopher Walken in The Country Bears. Walken is an actor who is known for taking almost every part offered to him. It's just a nutso performance, yet perfectly in keeping with what we expect from Walken. He's excellent in more serious films like The Deer Hunter and Catch Me If You Can, but when he pops up in something like Gigli and The Country Bears, you know you'll get something quite bizarre and yet also memorable. Both The Country Bears and Jem and the Holograms infamously flopped at the box office. However, because Jem cost so little to make and the filmmakers were so sure they were going to launch a franchise, I'm not joking when I say the film ends with a mid-credit scene, not unlike what you'll see in a Marvel film when they set up the next film and its primary villains. And while Marvel mid-credit scenes are about 30 seconds or so, this bit goes on for quite a while. Depending on your point of view, this was an awesome promise for a film that sadly will never come, or you're just thankful there won't be another movie and you're glad you won't have to see the Misfits join the Holograms for another disappointment. So, which is worse? For me, I have to go with The Country Bears. I think while Jem does not really work due to its generic storyline and direction and oddball subplots, the actors are certainly charming, and there is an energy in the beginning of the film when the sisters are just in their house having fun and putting together music videos. The other two acts just fall into obvious cliches. The Country Bears is just kind of stupid, and the sort of pandering family picture that is not funny doesn't really take full advantage of its central plot, and we get some disappointing musical numbers and animatronics that, while certainly nice effort, are somehow less charming than the ones in the theme park attraction that inspired it. But hey, at least it's got Christopher Walken doing arm farts. Wait, why is that a positive? Anyway, Let me know in the comments which of these films you think is worse, and I'll see you next time.